Again, my name is Sarah Murphy. I am the data visualization and data literacy librarian for the libraries. And I have been a data visualization enthusiast since, well, I think 2012. So give me a second here. Let me get my screen set up the way I'd like to have it. And we are ready to go. Now, the first thing I want to emphasize about data visualization is that data visualization is definitely, it is not new. When we think about this, cave drawings, maps, things that humans have been doing for centuries are really, in essence, a form of visualization. So here we have a bar chart, and it was done by William Playfair, who is considered the father of modern data visualization. And this is looking at exports and imports from Scotland for 2 different years and how they've changed. And then in everyday life, here I have the ticker chart for Microsoft. I downloaded this yesterday and it's the last 6 months. Sometimes we use things like the bar charts on Google to figure out when to go to Starbucks or not go to Starbucks or another restaurant or a library. But data visualization does not need to be super formal. Sometimes a simple stick drawing. I love this book. It's called Math with Bad Drawings, and it's all of this. He has a whole chapter for digital humanities, and he talks about novels he's read by Faulkner and all the adverbs in the novels. And he's presented the greatness of the book by the number of adverbs per 1,000 words here, and says a lot just with a simple chart and pen and ink drawing. And there are many different ways you can display your data. So my father, he loves wooden roller coasters. The Beast at Kings Island is one of his favorites. And this visualization comes from Tableau Public. It's by a gentleman named Kevin Fleurage. And it's interactive. If you look at it on Tableau Public, the link is down here, and we can share the slides after today's presentation. So you can link to anything that's in this slide deck. But live, I can roll over these bars here and it will give me additional information about this roller coaster. I love how this is presented with both graphs. It's also an infographic at the same time, and it cites its data sources, which is always a good best practice when you're putting together an interactive data visualization. So data visualization, as it's defined, it's all types of visual representations that support the exploration, examination, and communication of data. And it's really helpful because when we show our data in a visual form, it enhances our ability to think about it. When we look at our data visually, we can see the patterns and trends. It's much more effective and interesting than looking at data on a flat text table or spreadsheet. Sometimes in the text table and spreadsheets, the highs and lows get buried because there are so many columns with just numbers everywhere, overwhelming our senses. So data visualization, it can enhance our memory. If we're looking at data together as a group, it can help us have nascent understandings about a situation, a problem. It can be used to help with advocacy or help align a community on the actions that they need to take. And again, it is something that is very efficient. If you visualize your data rather than having to go and look at every data point, you can summarize it quickly in one place. Now, I read that there are over 450 data visualization tools. And I really like this graphic. It's by a gentleman named Jonathan Schwabish. He has a book called Better Data Visualizations that is available through our library as an ebook. And I love this book. I keep it, actually have a print copy and I keep it on my desk. I flip through it when I need some inspiration. But in this graphic, we're looking at all these various data visualization tools and the barrier to entry or using these tools. So the tools on the left are the more ubiquitous tools, things like Excel, Infogram that are relatively easy to use. And over on our right, many of you are already using R and Python for your statistics, but you can also use these tools for data visualization. They require some learning. There's a higher learning curve with these tools, but you can create a chord diagram, for instance, in R very, very quickly. It might not be the most visually appealing chord diagram, so you might want to create something in R and then pull it into Adobe Illustrator and enhance it, or sometimes get your data organized in R and then pull the data into Tableau and create the same diagram there. There are lots of options. But regardless of the program that you choose, it's helpful to know data visualization best practices. Many of these tools we can take out of the box, throw something together, and have a graph, but it might not be the best graph. We could easily make a misleading graph and more. So it's first off, whenever we're visualizing our data, it's really important to know our audience. For instance, if I'm communicating data to a scientific community, my community might be familiar with certain types of graphs, and it might even expect certain types of graphs. Excuse me. So knowing that, I will tailor how I visualize my data for a particular audience. Other times, I might be taking a scientific concept and translating it for a lay community. I might use a different graph in that context. So it's important to know your audience. It's important to provide context wherever you can for a figure. So either in a title, try to communicate the key takeaways or findings that you have seen in the data and in your graph in a title or in a figure title. If it's an interactive visualization, incorporate instructions. Don't assume that the individuals who are using your visualization will just inherently understand how to use it. Add things like click here to see XYZ and filter this so that you can see something, something, something. If it's appropriate, add interactivity to your graph. This isn't always appropriate if you're making a graph that's going to be published in a paper, etc. Apply your visual best practices and then test with friends, colleagues, especially if you're making an interactive visualization. Things break, things don't always work as they're supposed to. And it's best to find those quirks before you share your visualization, if at all possible. So what are the visual best practices? Well, the biggest one is to choose the right chart for your data and your purpose of your visualization. So I have a couple of graphs here and I highly recommend, excuse me, visualizing your data 3 or 4 different ways. And try to present it in a different graph because sometimes one graph, the same data in one graph might be more effective to present it one way than another. So often when we do a survey, we have our gender question. And just for the sake of simplicity here, I wanted a yes, no category or either or, and I realized there's more gender categories. So please excuse me here, but I wanted just 2 categories right now just for this part of the talk. And so if I have something where I have like a 60-40 split, I can use a pie chart here because there's really only 2 categories. Pie charts don't usually work when there's more than 2 or 3, maybe 4 categories because it gets very difficult for people to see the sizes of the pie slices, right? But this is one way to present this kind of data. But I also have the option of creating an isotype chart. So here I have the same question or breakdown, but instead of using the pie slices, I have a picture and 60% with the 6 female icons and 40% with the 4 male. Sometimes, though, depending on my audience, a simple call out number where the main takeaway here is that the majority of the respondents to this questionnaire were female. It's front and center with the large number 60%, and then the categorical number, the value female is underneath that number. And yet here I have what's called a population pyramid. And this is really, I really like this graph because rather than having to have a separate graph for the age distribution for this particular project and this gender category, I can plot this both out on the same graph. And so here, when I look at the breakdown by gender and by age, I see that relatively speaking, in each age population, with a few exceptions, um, they're pretty similar. So, where do I get ideas for showing my data in a couple different ways to figure out what graph might most resonate for my data and my audience? Well, one tool I really like to share is this Financial Times visual vocabulary. And I actually have this blown up in my office. I keep it up on my wall. Uh, it's a great way of saying, if I'm trying to show change over time, I might want to, instead of just using the trend chart, maybe I'll think of something like a slope graph or a Priestley timeline. If I'm trying to show correlation, I'm not only restricted to the scatter plot. I can look at things like a heat map. And so we have our different kinds and categories of chart types and things that we're trying to share with that chart. We can look at this nice tool and generate some ideas on how we might share that um, uh, data with others. If you are a Tableau user, this visual vocabulary has been translated to all the different into Tableau, like Tableau structure. The gentleman that did the Beast, Kevin Flarage, he has a twin named Ken, actually. I think his twin Ken took this visual vocabulary, and in Tableau Public, if you just search for visual vocabulary, there is a workbook that has a template for every single chart you see here on this page. It shows you how to construct that chart in Tableau. Here we have Evergreen, Stephanie Evergreen's quantitative chart chooser. And what I really like about this particular um, visual is that she really emphasizes what you're trying to accomplish with your visualization questions that you typically ask yourself. So if you have a finding and you really need to emphasize a specific number, sometimes she calls it the big number, I call it a call out number. Many of us have different words to say the same thing. If you want to show how your number is better than the benchmark, you can do things like the benchmark line, the bullet charts, lots of different ideas based on what you're trying to show. Kinds of questions are driving your visualization choice. Stephanie also has her qualitative chart chooser, and qualitative data can be really challenging to figure out how to display effectively with data visualization. So she has a whole chapter in this book, Effective Data Visualization, that's just dedicated to qualitative data. But she also has this qualitative chart chooser. She asks you, what story are you trying to tell? And then she has it plotted out here. If you're doing a thematic analysis and you're trying to show a hierarchy, maybe you want to try a network map, etc. So all these different chart types that might be effective for your data. And then a classic chart chooser is Andrew Abella's chart chooser. And this one's a really good one if it's based on what you're trying to show. If you're trying to show a relationship and you have 3 variables, it's going to recommend this bubble chart here. If you have trying to show a comparison and you're trying to show change over time with just a few points, it offers these options. Many points, it offers options based on what you're trying to achieve or what you're trying to visualize and the variables that you have. So in addition to choosing the right chart for my data and the purpose of my visualization, some other visual best practices include emphasizing the most important data. So if I have a line chart and really only one line is important, maybe I just want to emphasize the fiscal year 2023 data versus fiscal year 2021 and all the other fiscal years on the chart. I could make all of the lines that are not fiscal year 2023 gray and make the fiscal 2023 line something very bold, like bold black, bold red, right? We always have to think about our colors and limiting and using colors and fonts consistently. I tend to rely on OSU branding colors because I know that they've been tested for accessibility. But there's a lot of color choosers out there that have also been tested for accessibility. So I recommend using those. Sometimes though, if you're creating a figure for a publication, maybe your publication only publishes figures in grayscale. So if that happens, then, obviously we're restricted in what we can do. So maybe we're going to use a 20% gray for one color, the color that we don't want to emphasize, and something like just black for the point that we're trying to emphasize. Less is usually better. So if you can take off grid lines and still have a meaningful graph, if you can, be very selective in the labels that you use, only if it's repeated. For instance, year, sometimes it might be better to embed the year directly on the graph rather than in the axes. It really just depends, again, on what you're doing. But less is usually better. So if you can try to strip out as much as you can that's extraneous and it's repetitive for your graph, and keep things simple. So here's another example. So this is a visual I did from some open data about a transportation survey in New York City. And one of the questions asked participants to identify the location of their primary residence. And so we could have put together a bar chart that had all the zip codes and the number of people who lived in each zip code. But for this particular project, we were playing around with interactive software. And so we have a map of all the different zip codes in New York City, and we're using color to show the different boroughs, but we're also using color on a diverging scale to show the number of individuals who responded to this survey in each zip code within each borough. So the darker hues of purple indicate more individuals in this particular borough right here responded than in other boroughs. Zip codes. And because you can take two charts and marry them together, especially when you're using a tool like Tableau that allows you to connect a map and use it as a filter for another chart. Here we have an example of where you embed instructions in an interactive visualization. So it says, click on a zip code to view the time a survey respondent typically leaves for work and returns home from work. And because the audience wanted to look at overnight shifts in particular, wherever you see an overnight shift, it appears in red. So if I click on this zip code here, only the data, this is a Gantt chart down here, only the time that the individual has left for work, so this is each survey respondent left and returned home, is here down on the bottom. So if I click on a zip code over here, this chart down here will change. And we've emphasized those individuals who are on the overnight shifts. Here they are in red. I really like this particular visual. And here is a good example of when a simple call out number makes combined with an icon, makes an incredible difference. So this is from an organization that helps train nonprofits to write better annual reports. And the biggest takeaway over on the left is that 92% of nonprofits spend less than $1 million annually, and 88% spend less than $500,000. But that nonprofits here in the middle employ more than 10% of America's private workforce. So this was a very simple way of saying nonprofits are small, but have a huge impact. So how do we learn data visualization? Well, I really passionately feel that one of the best ways to learn data visualization, like any class, is to find your people. Join a community if that's possible. Take a training class. Find others to learn how to use. And if you want to learn how to use a new tool, find others to learn with if you can, and if that fits your learning needs and your time and your personality, etc. So upcoming classes we have here in the use in the Research Commons, and yes, this is a shameless plug, but we have Tableau for Research Bootcamp that's coming up in March, and we also have a Tableau and Surveys Bootcamp that's coming up in April. These are not the only tools that we provide instruction for, but they are the ones that are coming up, and we always list our events on the Research Commons website. But you can also watch training videos. There's a lot of really good content out on YouTube and LinkedIn Learning. Um, Again, it just depends on you and your learning style. I actually find I prefer to read books because I need more linear learning. And so I will share a bunch of books that I have found very helpful for learning how to visualize data better in Excel, Tableau, R, and Python here in a few minutes. And actually right away. But like learning data visualization in general. I really like this data story by Nancy Duarte. And our library does have this book. Unfortunately, it's not available as an ebook, but this is a great book if you are incorporating data visualizations into things like TED Talks and advocacy presentations. She blends very well um, using action-oriented words with graphs and giving your graphs really good, engaging titles. The next title here, Better Data Visualizations, A Guide for Scholars, Researchers, and Wonks. This is a pretty fat book, but it's nice in that every chapter addresses a chart family. So they will have a whole chapter on change over time, and will show all the different charts that you can create that would show that concept. And then never discount the infographics. This cool infographics by Randy Crum. I like this book also. I believe it's available online too in the library. A great resource for gathering some ideas on how you can effectively use icons and the whole infographic approach to sharing your data. I never ever I'm a shameless Tableau enthusiast, but that's just because I find Tableau very interesting. But I never want to discount Excel, especially if you have a small data set, maybe 400 rows with maybe 5 columns of data. It might not be worth your time, energy, and more to invest a lot of time in learning a higher level tool when you can create a Tableau-esque graph in Excel if you just have some information about ways of using Excel to or enhance. I'm lost for words here. I want to say hacking Excel to make it work and make a really cool visual. And maybe that's just what I need to say. So this Anything Jonathan Schwabish is a very, very good book, but he has higher level graphs in there that you can make in Excel that Excel will not tell you in their chart ribbon are available, but they are. It's just you take one graph as a root and then you make several changes to that graph and then you have a higher level graph. I like Storytelling with Data by Cole Nussbaumer Knaflic. This book's also online. And what I really like both about Cole's book and Stephanie Evergreen's Effective Data Visualization book is that every example in both of these books has been made with Excel. And Stephanie gives play-by-play instructions on how to create the higher level charts in Excel with her book. So here's an example from Cole's book. All of these different charts were created in Excel, and Cole likes to emphasize the simplifying your chart and how taking things off like grid lines that are automatically placed on by Excel and other programs. If you take them off and you add annotations, you often have a much more effective, engaging, impactful visual. if you'd like to learn data visualization in Tableau, I have two books I really highly recommend. And one is Practical Tableau by Ryan Sleeper, and the other is Innovative Tableau by Ryan Sleeper. These books are getting a little dated, but they're still, overall, the concepts are pretty solid. I like them because the first book, especially, it was everything that Ryan wished he had known when he first started using Tableau, but there were no instructional materials at that time. And it's organized in 100 chapters that are only 5 to 7 pages long. They have detailed figures, and it says click here, click there, do this, then do that. It walks you by step to create some of these specialty charts. And then for inspiration, I really like Tableau Public's visualization of the day. I've learned how to create so many different charts I would have never even known existed just by looking at visualizations that are posted there every daily. R for Data Science is a great book for just R in general. And I really like the Python Crash Course and Automate the Boring Stuff with Python. Those two are really good, solid books for getting you up and running with Python and visualizing data, simple data in Python. And it's really, really, though, whatever you read or whatever training you go to, practice, practice, practice. Right after you've done a sample exercise, take what you've learned and apply it to your own data. That's the hardest part about data visualization, taking what you've learned in training and applying it to your practice. But the more quickly that you do it, I believe the faster you'll learn to do some higher level charts and really master your craft here. And also, just again, re-emphasizing, take notes of visualizations you admire, keep a little notebook somewhere. So because one of my data visualizations I'm most proud of really came from something totally random, and it was some kind of baseball visualization I saw. And I'm really not into baseball, but I was able to apply it to a library setting, and it was pretty cool, at least in my mind. I have some examples here. I'm not going to go to them just right now, but they will be in the materials that we'll share with you after this class. But if we click on these, we go to these different websites. There's some really good, impactful, and I would say creative ways of sharing data. And I pulled this together for a public health class I did last year, I believe. And just for an overview of the kind of services that we provide in the Research Commons, I just want to remind everyone that we're always here to help you find data for your project, whether you're visualizing it or just you need data to add to your analysis, right? We're also available to help you clean and structure your data. So the Tableau and Surveys class I mentioned a few slides back, a good chunk of that class is really about setting your data up in a specific way so that when you pull it into Tableau, you can create graphs and charts pretty quickly, and it will make your life a lot easier. Um, um, I'm here to help you select the best data visualization tool for your project timeframe and skill set. So I again want to emphasize that some of these higher level tools like Tableau, Tableau, R and Python, D3, you might be able to create really cool graphs with these tools, but your project might not need a really cool graph because maybe your audience does not understand the radar chart, for instance. Maybe you only have a week to throw together your visual. If you already have experience with R and Python, then it might be something that you just need some help finding some resources to create a specific kind of chart. I've had libraries are really good with synonyms, right? Different disciplines call different charts different names, and yet they're the same chart. So I've been asked for information on how to create circle graphs, and then with some added questions, we figured out that we were looking for chord diagrams, but then another person would say circle graphs, and what they were looking for was bubble charts. So the trick often is getting the right words so that you can search for the chart type that you really want to execute. And so the library can definitely help with crossing those different disciplines, finding you the resources that you need so that you can create some of these higher level specialty charts. Um, I'm available to help critique your data visualizations and help you apply some of the data visualization best practices. I do keep a number of training materials on this data visualization website here. Um, we also in the library, myself, but also my colleagues in the Research Commons, were very good at helping you document your processes using a bunch of different tools, but it's always good practice to document your process for preparing your data, analyzing your data, and then visualizing your data, especially if you needed to clean that data, if you needed to transform that data so that you could pull it into a data visualization tool, how you did that so that you can share that process with someone else. Or if you have to go and update your visualization 2 or 3 years later, you don't have to retrain yourself on or try to remember everything that you did and get yourself all confused. And then again, throughout the Research Commons, we offer several boot camps and workshops and other events. Just the Tableau ones are coming up, so that's why they're in there. And this is me. This is Sarah Murphy. I am, again, the data visualization and data literacy librarian. My email is murphy.465. My office is in room 320H at the 18th Avenue Library. And up on the Research Commons website, you can schedule a consultation with me at any time. There's a little schedule a consultation link, and it opens up my calendar. And so you can place a meeting directly on my calendar. And that's really all I have. So I am ready to take questions. And remember, if you have a question, if you could just throw that in the chat, that would be wonderful.
I've added a couple of items in the chat as well. Some of the things that Sarah was discussing as she went along. I put a link to our event page for the Tableau for Research Bootcamp, as well as Sarah's data visualization page, and then some information on follow-up survey link as well. But then I'm watching the chat in case there are other questions that come up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jared. Yes, thank you, Edith. I'm planning on sending out the slide deck to participants today. The Tableau for Research Bootcamp will be in person in the Research Commons Computer Lab from 9 to noon on the 22nd of March. Any other questions? Counting to 10. Well, thank you for being with us today. I appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to listen to us and our, I don't know, our data visualization program in the libraries. And I just want to emphasize that we're here to support you. And I look forward, especially to learning more about your projects and helping you however I can with either improving a visualization that you've already made, figuring out how to make a visualization. Maybe you have data and you're not really sure what to do with it. I'm here to help you figure that out. I'm really good at bouncing ideas off with you and brainstorming. And I'm a Tableau passionate, but that doesn't mean Tableau is the other only tool out there. I'm also very Excel proficient and getting better with Python and R. And so feel free to ask whatever questions you may have. Again, at Murphy.465. Thank you.